Welcome to day 251, and we are in one of the most important things in our reading right now. Daniel's in the lion den, and then Daniel gets the visions and stuff and being told about the 70 sets of 7. So get your pencils ready. This is a very important one in the next few readings. Again, we're picking up on some stuff, but this right here is probably a big deal as far as understanding the timing of events that are going to happen in probably our lifetime or soon thereafter. So in Daniel 6, we read about him being in the lion's den, and I want to explain something about what led up to that happening. First, they attacked Daniel's religion. So in chapter 6, verse 5, it talks about, let's see here. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So this is crazy that the king is going to be deceived by his people that he's trusting to tell him good things. In verse 6 and 7, so the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, long live King Darius. So they appeal to the conceitedness of the king. Okay? We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced, give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of the lions. So the king's trusting these people, and it all depends on who we have around us. How foolish it is for a king to not take advice, but at the same time, the king has to be wise enough to know when somebody's brown-nosing. So they used a religion against Daniel, and that's kind of what's being thrown around today. They're just blatantly coming out and just going against Christians and Jews right now. But that will come to a fever pitch even as we get near the end of allowing the sin of our time to run its course. So what does the king do? This is what I think is important. We talked about Nebuchadnezzar and whether or not he's going to be in heaven. So let's talk about King Darius. What's King Darius do? In chapter 6, verse 18, he goes on and he says, then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't sleep at all that night. So he fasted because he didn't know what else to do. He was in disbelief of how he could allow something like this to happen to one of his seemingly friends. Yeah, I mean, he really obviously trusted Daniel, and there was some sort of relationship, a connection there. And then the king says something amazing. After, Daniel's brought out of the lion's den and he throws those idiots into the lion's den. What I find funny about that, not funny, it's actually terrible, is those men, their wives and their children, their feet never touched the ground. They were chewed up so fast by the lions. God can do anything. But then King Darius says this to the people, a decree to all the people. I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. He acknowledges that God is real, alive, and well. That is an extremely important statement. He is the living God. He will endure forever. He acknowledges the eternal power of God. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lion's den. So if you're asking, well, gosh, is Darius going to be in heaven? Well, obviously, I don't know if Nebuchadnezzar is in heaven. I don't know if Darius is going to be in heaven. But in this time, King Darius is acknowledging God as being all-powerful and all present and everlasting. That is key. So now we go to the 70 years that's mentioned again in chapter 9, verse 2. And you'll need to earmark chapter 9 because this is the big deal. This is another big deal in the Bible. Verse 2 says, during the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, learned from reading the word of the Lord as revealed to Jeremiah the prophet. So he's getting this from Jeremiah. So this is a 70 years citing, but it's really him reading what Jeremiah said. That Jerusalem must lie desolate for 70 years. Okay, 70 sets of 7. So it's lying desolate for 70 years. Okay? Remember, they're to be in exile for 430 years. That's their punishment. And yet God mentioned it many times that he's going to bring them back after 70 years and he's going to take care of them. So 430 minus 70, and we've talked about this before, 430 minus 70 gives you 360. Well, what happens at that 360? Because God's going to bring them back. And as we read through a lot of these things, the walls are going to be rebuilt. The temple's going to be rebuilt. And the people actually are coming back from exile. And there's during a time of problems. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's read this part. And this is important. I am going to read this. This is very, very important. Okay? Let me mention real quickly a description of God that went on my list. Daniel 9:9. But the Lord our God is merciful and forgiving, even though we have rebelled against him. That's how awesome God is. So these bad things are happening and God has allowed it to happen, but he's also merciful and forgiving and tries to shorten the punishment to 70 years. But he knows that's not going to be right. And I'm trying to allude to something that we're going to read about. And then those 360 years that are left over are going to be multiplied by 7 that we read. The punishment will be multiplied 7 times over if they rebel, even after that time. You take 360 times 7, you get 2,500 years. All right, I'm going to show you the timeline here in a minute. I want to read this. Starting in verse 24. And you should have read everything else. A period of 70 sets of 7. So now you got a 7 sighting. 70 sets of 7 has been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish their rebellion, to put an end to their sin, to atone for their guilt, to put an end of their sin, to bring an everlasting righteousness, to confirm the prophetic vision, and to anoint the most holy place. So 70 sets of 7 have to happen before to confirm the prophetic vision and to anoint the most holy place. 70 sets of 7. These are 7 times years. 7 years. 70 sets of 7 years. So 70 times 7, 490 years. Okay. Now listen and understand. 7 sets of 7 plus 62 sets of 7 will pass from the time the command is given to rebuild Jerusalem. So the command's being given to rebuild Jerusalem when? After the 70 years. 7 sets of 7, 62 sets of 7. 7 sets of 7 would be 49 years. 62 sets of 7 is 434 years. Okay? I'm going to show you an outline here in a second. Just want to get you ready for this. Why not just say 69 sets of 7? Well, they've already said 70 sets of 7. They put them all together. But what God is saying is in here, there's 70 sets of 7, and they're separated into 3 different pieces. 7 sets of 7 and 62 sets of 7. So that's 69 sets of 7 that are happening. That passes. That leaves 1 set of 7 left over. A 7-year period left over. Okay? So 69 sets of 7 have to happen. That will pass from the time the command is given to rebuild Jerusalem, and it is rebuilt during that time period after the 70 years, until a ruler, the anointed one, comes. Christ. Until Christ comes. So, now I need to explain something here. So I know you can't really read this. I'm putting it on here so you can kind of see what's going on. 586 BC, around that time. We don't know exactly the year. This is the year we've come up with. 586 BC, 70 years have happened, 516 BC. Okay, up here I have 7 sets of 7 and 62 sets of 7. And over here I have Christ crucified, the anointed one. The anointed one comes at 0 here. So somewhere, if you add that 33 years on to the 401, you get 434. So somewhere in here, there's a split. And then you also have another set of 7, 49 years, that's happening in here. And as we start to read, you start to fill these things in. Okay? But what's key here, I'm going to back up, is this 516 BC. That's when you have 70 years off of their 430-year punishment. Okay, so 430 years at 516 BC, they still have 360 years left over. Grab your calculator. 360 times 7. If they rebel against God at this point, he multiplies their punishment by 7. There's 360 years left. Multiply it by 7, that's 2,520 years. We are at 516 BC. All right? So minus 516. That's 2004. Okay? What we've been saying all along is you get very close to the May 15th, 1948 time versus 2004. These dates are all off because we don't know exactly how close our calendars are. So when we say, 2,500 years, that's what that 360 times 7 is. You got to understand, these dates are off enough that puts it at May 15th, 1948. I can't tell you for sure. There's not a scholar alive that can tell you for sure when that is. But God brought their people back in one day, May 15th, 1948. Now you do the math from there, and you see where that puts you. And I do my own dates as I'm reading through this, and my dates are a little off from the scholars that put them. And these are scholars. These people study this nonstop. And the point is, there's not a scholar alive that knows the exact dates of those things back then. They can get fairly close. But I find that amazing that it's that close. But here's the thing. None of that matters about when that is that it says 69 sets of 7 are going to happen before the anointed one comes. Jerusalem will be rebuilt with streets and strong defenses, despite the perilous times. Perilous times, if you read Ezra 4, which, we'll get into that the people, when the exiles get back to Jerusalem, all the Arab people that are around there going, what? No way, we're not letting you do this. And it got rebuilt under armed guards and the threat of being attacked. They had to carry swords while they're carrying things in their hands to help rebuild the temple and then the walls. Okay, now, here's where we get into this. After this period of 62 sets of 7, and the first 7 sets of 7 have already happened, after this period of 62 sets of 7, the anointed one will be killed. That puts it back here. So somewhere this timing is off a little bit. But again, that's not for us to decide. It's for us to accept that God's timing is perfect. We just didn't have it on a calendar somewhere. So the anointed one will be killed, appearing to have accomplished nothing. This is the whole point. The Jews thought that Christ was going to come and set up his kingdom forever, and that they were going to be taken care of, because that's what we've been reading about, except there's a ton in here that talks about the tribulation time. In the Old Testament, it's talking about the tribulation time. It talks about all the horror that's going to happen. Okay? And then the Jewish people will be protected. I don't understand how you can read this and not see this. This is the Old Testament. I'm not even in the New Testament yet. And I can figure it out. It makes you wonder why we don't have Bible in school anymore. Okay? So, the ruler will make a treaty, appearing to have accomplished nothing, and a ruler will arise whose armies will destroy the city and the temple. 70 AD, the city and the temple were destroyed. The end will come with a flood, and war and its miseries are decreed from that time to the very end. If you read in Matthew 24, and you should have this marked, Matthew 24, as I'm not having mine marked. It's a new Bible, so nothing falls into place. Mine used to open right to it. Matthew 24. They asked Jesus, when do we know about these signs? Okay. And Jesus says, it's pretty simple here. They say, tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? Well, first of all, the second coming is at the end of the tribulation. Jesus says, don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I'm the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars. Wars and threats of wars, and that's what that's talking about. Wars until the end, and then we have had nothing but wars. More people have died from wars over the last 100 years, 150 years, than all of history combined, of all the wars. And he says, don't panic. These things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. And we're not there yet, and I don't want to keep reading that. And I want to make sure you get what this is talking about. We haven't gotten to the 70th set of 7. These are all things that Jesus say are going to lead up to the second coming. There is not a prophecy about the rapture necessarily. We'll talk, there's lots of references to the rapture, but there's not a prophecy as far as, look at all the things leading up to the rapture. All of these things are leading up to the second coming of Christ, which is at the end of the tribulation time. Almost done, I'm sorry. The ruler will make a treaty with the people for a period of 1 set of 7 years. But after half of this time, 3.5 years into it, mid-tribulation, he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings. And as the climax to all his terrible deeds, he will set up a sacrilegious object that causes desecration until the fate decreed of this defiler is finally poured out on him. So 3.5 years, there's this false peace with Israel. But yet they're still attacking all over the world. There's wars all over going on. It's not pretty. It's not peaceful. That's not what this is saying. There is a false peace, that a treaty that's there. That doesn't mean that they aren't going after the people. Until the time of the end, there's wars decreed. There's famines and earthquakes. There's natural disasters all over the place. There's disease. It ramps up until the very end. 3.5 years into it, he finally says, enough. Take them. Because it was a lie to get them all in Israel. And they run for their lives. And we'll read about that in Matthew in the 4 Gospels there. So, that's your 70 sets of 7. The 70th is the tribulation time. And then I want to read Ezra 1:5. Then the gods stirred the hearts of the priests and Levites and the leaders of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple of the Lord. God stirred the hearts of the people to go. I'm going to leave it at that. That's your day 251. See you tomorrow.